Hey guys, welcome back. I'm sorry if it's a bit jarring to see and hear me. I promise you that the audio is going to get much better in just a moment. I wanted to say, number one, happy holidays. I hope you're having a very Merry Christmas with you and yours and a safe one. But also to let you know, we have a very special guest that is going to not only be illustrating this video, but also voicing it. It's Arch Pendragon from the Discord, and he's our resident lore master, and he has his own channel seen on screen at the moment. So if you like this video, check it out. And he does an amazing plethora of voices. His delivery is very close to mine. I don't feel he gets enough reach with his videos. I thought it's a bit unfair. So for just this video and the one covering Diablo 4's DLC, so throw it on my channel. You can have all the profit, and let us know in the comments below if you enjoyed it and if you want to see more from him on Diablo. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy.
Before players could descend into the catacombs beneath Tristram, they were given a relic, a tangible artifact of lore and wisdom. It was more than simply an instructional booklet. It served as both a compendium and a grimoire regarding the nightmares that lived within a world on the brink of damnation. It provided us with quotes and stories that helped build the atmosphere, understand the tools of survival, the classes you would embody, and the horrors we would face. Each entry elevated the mundane mechanics of your typical ARPG into elements of a larger, more cohesive world, and reading it felt akin to learning from a forbidden tome of lost knowledge. It was the twilight of the 20th century. A tempest steadily stirred within the halls of Condor Games, a small studio nestled in San Mateo, California. It was here, in 1996, through the fires of ambition and creativity, a title known as Diablo was forged, a result that would forever alter the landscape of gaming. Condor Games was purchased by Blizzard Entertainment during Diablo's development, and eventually rebranded as Blizzard North, a union of visionaries which eventually housed the crucible where dreams and nightmares collided. Their creation was a dark mirror to the times, reflecting the burgeoning potential of computer gaming and its ability to transport players into fully realized worlds, alive with atmosphere, story, and demons. Released on December 31st, 1996, Diablo emerged like a herald of darkness, as it was no mere game, but an invitation, a call to descend into the labyrinthine depths beneath the ruined town of Tristram. Every step downward felt like a descent into the subconscious, where the primal fears of humanity were brought to life through haunting sprites and a soundtrack that seemed to seep from the very bones of the earth itself. The story of Diablo was an allegory of hubris and corruption, the Lord of Terror, a personification of unchecked ambition and a darkness that resides within the human soul. Yet, as with all tales of hubris, mortals inevitably tread where they should not. A church that once symbolized faith and unity became infested with horrors summoned by the very evil it sought to imprison. Mechanically, Diablo was a revelation. It evolved the addictive formula of randomized loot, procedurally generated dungeons, and real-time combat, a combination that drew players into an endless cycle of risk and reward. These mechanics created a gameplay loop as hypnotic as the flicker of flame in the dark. Blizzard North had turned the mundane act of clicking a mouse into a symphony of destruction and discovery. It was beautiful. In the years since its release, Diablo has been hailed as the cornerstone of the action role-playing game genre. Its legacy is a testament to the vision and tenacity of its creators. However, Blizzard North, like the town of Tristram itself, was eventually laid low. Its doors closed in 2005, but its spirit lives on in the countless games and developers inspired by its groundbreaking work. Which way is the right path? As I stand upon this chaotic crossroad of hate, how many ways are there to roam on this dark and damned road of fate?
There are many ways, my son, to find where the souls of demons remain. But it takes only 1 second of despair and of doubt until at last your soul they will gain. Inherit these lands, these things, these dreams that are yours, forever to adore. For there is no life in the depths of chaos, my son, for you to explore.
To find strength in righteousness is folly, for he seeks to topple those who have the farthest to fall.
But I, in truth, have been once here before. That savage witch Eric, she who called the shades back to their bodies, summoned me. My flesh had not been long stripped off when she had me descend through the rings of hell to draw a spirit back from the betrayer's circle. That is the deepest and the darkest place, the farthest from the heaven gods all. So rest assured, I know the pathway all.
Surt from the south comes, with flickering flame, shines from his sword, the Val god's sun. The stony hills are dashed together, the giantess's daughter. Men tread the path of hell, and heaven is cloven. Pierce me with steel, rend me with claw and fang. As I die, a legend is born for another generation to follow.
Wisdom is earned, not given.
He was skillful enough to have lived still, if knowledge could be set up against mortality.
Might and magic are spokes on the same wheel. In lacking one, you lack both.
Not even the sun can banish the phantoms of our land. Nevertheless, we huddle in the darkness and pray for dawn. Honor and courage are a warrior's right and left hands.
The only future peace has to offer is war.
I have seen the horrors that lie beneath the earth. I have felt the icy breath of darkness upon my skin. I have been gripped by the skeletal talons of death itself. What prayer can ever heal the bleeding marks of terror's embrace? A warrior's true strength lies not in the body, but in the spirit.
I'm not driven by hatred. I'm not driven by fear. I'm not driven by desire, duty, or any rationale. I can no longer feel any of these. All that remains is retribution. Cold and hard and final.
Gird thyself with the weapons of knowledge and the armor of wisdom. Victory is won as much through strength of mind and will as through brawn and steel. It is easy to go down into hell. Night and day, the gates of dark death stand wide. But to climb back again, to retrace one's steps to the upper air, there's the rub, the task. Break the bones, and the body will heal. Break the spirit, and the body will die. It is easier to stab someone in the back than it is to look them in the eyes. Society is built upon this principle, and it is universal amongst those who rule. The burning tongues of hell lap at our heels as we run, screaming from its horrible gaping maw. There can be no escape from the relentless beast of terror.
He who fights with monsters might take care lest he thereby become a monster.
Any master of battle should always take stock of his friends as well as his enemies, knowing both can in time be profitable.
But he who hides a dark soul and foul thoughts, benighted, walks under the midday sun. Himself is his own dungeon. Either slain, thou shalt gain heaven, or conquering thou shalt enjoy the earth. Therefore arise, son of Kunti, unto battle, making a firm resolve, holding pleasure and pain alike, gain and loss, victory and defeat. Then gird thyself for battle. Thus thou shalt not get evil.
When all magic fails, rely on 3 feet of steel and a strong arm.
All things roll here. Horrors of midnights, campaigns of a lost year, dungeons disturbed, and groves of lights. Echoing on these shores, still clear, dead ecstasies of questing nights. Yet how the wind revives us here.
I am yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And I have the power to be born a second time. I am the divine, hidden soul who created the gods and gives sepulchral meals to the denizens of the deep, the place of the dead and heaven. Hail, Lord of the shrine that stands in the center of the earth. He is I, and I am he.
O Rose, thou art sick, the invisible worm that flies in the night, in the howling storm, has found out thy bed of crimson joy, and his dark secret love does thy life destroy.
Strange and stringent, it shrilled terror to the ears that heard it through the hall's side wall. The grisly plaint of God's enemy, his song of ill success. The sobs of the damned one, bewailing his pain.
The Warrior. The warriors of the lands of Honduras are well trained in all weapons of war, ranging from crusading paladins to unscrupulous mercenaries. Warriors can be found wherever there is conflict amongst their countrymen. Many of these adventuresome men joined with King Leoric's army and went to battle against the northern kingdom of Westmarch. As the fires of war burned themselves out, these warriors returned home to find their kingdom in shattered disarray. Dark rumors of the mysterious demise of King Leoric abound, and the evil that lurks within the cathedral has drawn many warriors to Honduras, seeking fortune and glory. Though they were warned by the people of Tristram, a few of these brave souls have ventured into the chaotic labyrinth beneath the old church, never to be heard from again. Whether they are driven by valor, honor, madness, or greed, new warriors arrive in Tristram every day, ready to challenge the dark unknown that awaits them beneath the earth. The warrior is the strongest and toughest of the 3 available classes, and he excels in the art of close combat. His primary weakness is that his extensive physical training has left little time to develop more than a rudimentary knowledge of magic. The extended periods of time that most warriors spend away from their homes and civilization requires that they learn to repair their own weapons and armor, although their skill is no match for the talent of a true blacksmith. The Rogue. The Sisters of the Sightless Eye are a loosely organized guild shrouded in mystery amongst the peoples of the West. These highly skilled archers employ ancient Eastern philosophies that develop an inner sight that they use both in combat and to circumvent dangerous traps that they may encounter. Known only as wandering rogues in the West, the sisters conceal their secret affiliation by posing as simple travelers. Many pompous fools have made the mistake of underestimating these steel-nerved women in combat and paid a terrible price for their vanity. The strange events transpiring in Honduras have caught the attention of many of these rogues. They have come from as far as the eastern dunes to test their skills against the dark evil that is said to be lurking in Tristram. It is also believed that untold riches wait to be discovered among the ruins of the Haradra monastery. Although not as powerful in close combat as the warrior, the rogue is the undisputed master of the bow. A skilled sister can send a stream of arrows at an opponent, each fired with a seemingly careless precision. The innate sixth sense that all rogues seem to possess also allows them to sense trapped fixtures, and aids them in the attempts to disarm these traps. The Sorcerer. Although practitioners of the mystic arts are scarce within the often superstitious and religious lands of the West, many magi have made the pilgrimage from the far east to see for themselves what horrors lie beneath the ruined cathedral of Honduras. The Veiled Brotherhood of the Beastiary, one of the eldest and most dominant mage clans of the East, has sent many of its acolytes to observe the dark events unfolding in Honduras firsthand. The Beastiary, known for their brightly colored turanish or spirit robes, have taken a keen interest in both gathering knowledge of demons and seeing them slain. The Beastiary elders hope that their acolytes will learn the secrets of the dark evil that they sense growing in the West and can destroy it. The possibility of discovering long-lost tomes of magical knowledge within the confines of the labyrinth has also captured the interest of many wandering sorcerers. Most magic in Honduras is in the form of enchanted items and elixirs. The Eastern sorcerers have developed a greater understanding of spellcasting than the other classes, and while the Beastiary neonate only knows the simplest of spells to start, he can expect to rapidly grow in power as he discovers new incantations. All sorcerers possess the ability to recharge spell staves by drawing on power from their surroundings and channeling them through their staff. The nature of magic. Magic is an extremely powerful force, the manipulation of which is carefully studied, frequently learned, but it is never fully mastered. Enchantments exude an aura that can be sensed by many, but years of training are required to properly exploit the mana that pervades our world. Some scholars use natural manifestations to explain the workings of the universe. In a common archetype, the physical world is likened to the sky, while the ethereal realm of magic is set as the ocean. If we follow this line of thought, spells are much like the turbulence that occurs where the two interact with each other. During the Sin War, demon and angel alike wrought powerful magics that threatened to tear the fabric of our reality apart. The physical and magical realms began to blur and merge, which, in our archetype, would be the equivalent to a fierce hurricane. And so, the forces of order sought to preserve our reality by limiting the power of mortal man. As a consequence, only the strongest wills can harness more than the most basic of magical effects. Even then, much energy is lost in the transition of power between the two realms. As a practitioner of the arcane arts grows more knowledgeable, he is able to create these effects with greater efficiency, resulting in spells that are more potent and have more endurance and drain less mana in their casting. The Beastiary. Within the Diablo compendium, Vishar Orus, a Viserai librarian, offers a dire missive to those who would brave the cursed depths beneath Tristram's cathedral. His words feel burdened with both urgency and doubt. His summarization is filled with fragmented truths drawn from ancient records of the Horadrim's war against the three prime evils. Orus paints the servants of the three prime evils as embodiments of their master's malice, ever-changing and unpredictable, warning us that no two foes will bear the same weakness. His advice is both pragmatic and chilling, emphasizing survival through vigilance and preparation, for the creatures of darkness attack with cowardly cunning and overwhelming numbers. Yet his account is incomplete, a reflection of the unknown horrors that remain hidden in shadow, the record of which, through Orus's own words, establishes a grim tone, grounding us in a world where knowledge is precious, but never absolute. It prepares adventurers not with reassurances, but with the haunting reminder that even the best prepared may falter when facing the horrors that lie below. Mephisto, the Lord of Hatred. Odium. The legions of Mephisto are driven by a hatred of all living things, especially those who are pure of heart. He counts as minions both the walking dead, who forever seek vengeance upon the living, as well as a host of demonically corrupted creatures whose twisted limbs and misshapen bodies leave them in eternal agony and rage. Skeletons. These are the skeletal remains of warriors who either died as soldiers in some dark campaign or were betrayed by those they most trusted. Now animated by unnatural forces, these troops of the damned forever seek new recruits to join their ranks. If our greatest fears do prove to be true, the skeletal warriors that are rumored to haunt the town of Tristram might well be the corrupted remains of the valiant Horadrim monks laid to rest in the catacombs beneath the church. Only an incredibly potent evil could have disturbed the peaceful slumber of these eremites. Skeletons are usually found in places where the dead are laid to rest, or at the sites of great battles. While physically fragile, they are never lacking in numbers, for those that fall to them in combat are damned to an eternal lust for living blood. Coupled with their unthinking rage, this makes them a most dangerous opponent. Zombies. Worm-ridden and reeking of foul decay, zombies are formed from the corpses of men executed for committing the most depraved and degenerate crimes against the innocent. They are driven by both the hatred that consumed them in life and an insatiable hunger for the flesh of the living. Tenacious and possessing stamina of infernal origin, zombies and their ilk make for a difficult encounter. Fortunately, these undead minions are lacking in both wit and mobility, which can be used to great effect against them. Overlords. Even the Seraphim are not immune to the corruption of the Dark Lords. One such angel, Inarius, was proud of his beauty and boasted loudly of his purity and worth. His thoughts became so clouded that he believed himself to be above both angel and demon, and he left the high heavens to form his own dominion. He constructed a great cathedral of mirrored glass and crystal, and followers flocked to him, drawn by his numinous charm and wealth. Once Inarius had gathered a sizable army, he decided to prove his power. Inarius first laid siege to an infernal temple devoted to the worship of Mephisto, but made the foolish mistake of overestimating his prowess. The armies of Inarius laid waste to the temple and killed the dark monks that dwelled within. The three evils had considered the vain warrior a mere nuisance and amusement until this time, but this was an insult that they could not bear. Mephisto himself is said to have appeared at the Cathedral of Inarius. He laid waste to the church and the surrounding countryside. The Lord of Hatred took the proud Archangel and his followers captive. He bound Inarius with tremendous chains and slowly tore the wings from the back of the angel. Great barbed hooks were then used to stretch out the once glowing skin, and his features were distorted by vile powers. Many of the followers of Inarius were given as gifts to Baal and Diablo, but the rest were molded to match the bloated image of the now crippled angel. To this day, Inarius is said to be trapped in hell within a chamber of mirrors, his eyelids torn from his face as he is forced to gaze upon his misshapen form for all eternity. His misguided followers now serve as hell's taskmasters, taking the anguish of their lost glory out upon the bodies of others. These grotesque demons have considerable brawn hidden beneath their layers of greasy flab. Do not underestimate their strength or their intelligence, for crossing swords with them is ill-advised. You will be far better served to combat them with ranged weapons or magic. Magma Demons. During the Great Conflict, tremendous battles were fought in both the high heavens and the burning hells. Both sides often carried the conflict deep within the realms of their enemies. During one epic battle, into the very heart of Mephisto's fiery lair, a group of brave seraphim warriors fronted an assault against the Lord of Hatred himself. One of these angelic soldiers made a bold attack and struck a fierce blow that caused the foul blood of Mephisto to rain upon the ground. Each drop that fell seared through the crust of hell itself and formed powerful demons shaped from molten rock. These demons quickly rose to the aid of their master and drove back the forces of light by striking them with thrown masses of lava that seared both flesh and bone. With the intensity of the burning hells, the losses dealt by these magma demons were tremendous. Baal, Lord of Destruction. Exidium. The soldiers of Baal seek the undoing of the universe. They strive for ultimate disorder and destruction, and to this end covet the destruction of all they behold. Order is an abhorrence to them, and these creatures are the manifestation of the forces of chaos. Fallen Ones. Swarms of these impish terrors have been known to come out of the night and tear apart a sleeping village in minutes. Small of stature and simian in appearance, these creatures possess surprising strength and unnatural agility. Other than killing, the only act which gives them pleasure is breeding, so expect to encounter them in large packs. The small size of these devils does fill them with cowardice, however, and this fear can be used against them. They prefer to attack under the guise of darkness and in large numbers whenever possible. If they are shown great strength, preferably by killing one of their kind, they will retreat and regroup. Do not turn your back on them though, for their appetite for destruction will eventually overcome their caution, and they will attempt to strike again. Goatmen. The lieutenants of Baal are bred for strength, endurance, and cunning. These demons constantly train themselves in the art of war, for battle is their bread, and the blood of innocents their water. There are several known clans of Goatmen, each given a different gift from their dark master. It is believed that to earn their powers, they once held mock wars in hell for the entertainment of the three brothers. Do not expect them to fight amongst themselves on the mortal realm, however, for they much prefer to slaughter the innocent. Like most of Baal's spawn, the bestial Ares are incredibly strong and agile. Be especially wary of their archers, for they are renowned for their accuracy and power of their great bows. Fleet of foot, they may try to evade an unwary foe and then attack from a different angle. Spitting Terrors. After an especially violent battle, Baal enjoyed celebrating with his brothers by holding a disgusting feast of blood, human flesh, and other hellish delights. The Bestia Acerbus are the descendants of dog-like creatures that lived by feeding upon the remains of Baal's nightmarish feasts. The variety of vile substances that the creatures consumed, along with their close proximity to the Lord of Destruction, twisted and warped the viscera of these hounds of hell. This diabolic species is capable of spitting up a variety of caustic fluids and projecting them a considerable distance. Packs of these terrors are especially devastating, as their bile has been known to eat through the strongest of armor and poison the most hardy of men. Great care must be taken when within the lair of these bestia. Their venom retains its potency for a considerable amount of time, and puddles of it may be found everywhere. When killed, the beast's inner toxins eat through the now dead flesh, leaving a dangerous trap for those foolish enough to tread upon its corpse. Horned Demons. Used as living siege engines, there are numerous accounts of these juggernauts smashing into the lines of seraphim and leaving only death and ruin in their wake. The skull and the single large horn in the snout of the demon are unnaturally durable. The horned demons prefer to wait until a clear path is available, and then they charge toward their victims at incredible speeds. Be wary of this initial charge. It is far better to deal with these creatures in close quarters or with magic. Diablo, Lord of Terror. Using illusion and fear as their greatest weapons, the attendants of Diablo are formidable adversaries. They prefer to wait for their opponent to display a moment of weakness before they attack. Equally dangerous in the dark or in your dreams, they are the fears of man made flesh by Diablo's will. These nightmares lurk at the edges of mortal perception from the moment that you take your first breath, and they long to be with you when you take your last. Winged Fiends. Some people are so hungry for power and knowledge that they're willing to sacrifice their humanity to the lords of hell in exchange for gifts that inevitably turn against them. One such group, a dark cabal of wizards, decided to take the power of creation into their own hands and magically created a race of creatures to act as servants and messengers. Using infernal abilities granted to them through their arcane pact, they formed small bat-winged imps that they believed would prove useful in carrying out deeds that were too trivial for their own efforts. Each of the sorcerers created an entity that reflected his magical specialization. The creatures thus created were small, nimble, and possessed an unnatural cunning. At first, the corrupt sorcerers were overjoyed at the success of their experiment, but they soon began to notice that the LA did not serve them as loyally as they had hoped. The creatures had taken to secretly feeding from the very essence of their masters, weakening them and eventually killing them. The sorcerers tried to destroy their creations, but the fiends banded together to combat them. The winged fiends had been secretly breeding outside of the sorcerers' domains, and swarms of them attacked, killing their former masters. To this day, the descendants of these creatures terrorize the countryside. Do not underestimate these foul demons. They are physically weak, but possess great speed. Many of them possess unearthly abilities, reflecting the powers of their creators, and they enjoy using their razor-sharp claws and hooked wings to tear the flesh from the faces of their victims. Scavengers. Maleficus Vorax are the smallest of the related group of demonic creatures that feed upon carrion, mostly the remains of victims killed by their larger cousins. Unlike most scavengers, however, they are extremely aggressive and will not hesitate to attack anyone hapless enough to encounter them. They have powerful legs, which they use for swift springing attacks, striking at vulnerable faces and throats. Their primary weakness is their voracious appetite. The smell of death may drive them into a feeding frenzy where they will stop their attacks to feast upon remains that are nearby. The Hidden. The Hidden are the boogeymen that haunt our dreams and live in the nightmares of children. Although they dwell at the edge of the physical and ethereal realms where they remain unseen by mortal sight, They can quickly manifest and strike those that appear vulnerable. Metis Occultus and others of their ilk feed on the essence of fear. When wounded, they will seek to retreat back into the ether to heal themselves. It is important to note that even while invisible, the creatures exist partially on the physical realm, and they can be affected by spells and weapons. Gargoyle. In ages past, it was customary to decorate buildings with stone statues of demons that were enchanted to serve as guardians and protectors of those within. The misshapen figures of the statues were designed to taunt and anger any demons that attempted to gain entrance. Diablo worked to unlock the wards that protected these granite images, and eventually was able to gift them with a Hadean life. The gargoyles arose from their captive sleep and swooped down to prey upon those whom they were created to protect. Naturally, the remaining statues were immediately destroyed, but there are Signum that escaped and continue to terrorize the innocent to this day. The act of transforming from flesh to stone allows the creature to heal any wounds that it has suffered, so it is best to either avoid these demons entirely or hunt them down until they are dead. Do not allow them to flee, for they will soon return in full force. Librarius ex Horodrum. Book 1 of Heaven and Hell. The Great Conflict. Since the beginning, the forces of light and darkness have engaged in an eternal war. The Great Conflict whose victor will rise from the apocalyptic ashes to hold sway over all creation. To this end, the angels of the high heavens adhere to strict militaristic disciplines. Seraphim warriors strike at the enemies of light with swords imbued with righteous wrath and justice. The angels believe that only absolute discipline can properly restore order to the myriad realms, while the demonic denizens of the burning hells hold that absolute chaos is the true nature of all things. The battles of the Great Conflict rage across both time and space, often infringing upon the very fabric of reality itself. From the crystal arch at the very heart of the high heavens to the arcane hellforge of the underworld, the warriors of these eternal realms journey to wherever their timeless conflict carries them. The legendary deeds of the heroes of the realms beyond elicit both veneration and insight. The greatest of these heroes was Israel, lieutenant to the archangel Tyrael, and bearer of the angelic runeblade Azurath. He once led a fierce attack upon the Hellforge as creation of the dark demon blade Shadowfang was nearing completion. His quest was to destroy both wielder and weapon, a charge that he was destined to never complete. Israel was overcome by legions of chaos and tragically was lost to the darkness. His fate stands as a testament to the fact that angels and demons alike shall fearlessly enter into any domain so long as their hated enemies dwell within. Although the Great Conflict burned hotter and longer than any of the stars in the sky, neither side could gain dominion over the other for long. Both factions sought some way to turn the tides of war to their favor. With the ascension of man and his mortal realm, the Great Conflict ground to a mysterious halt. Both armies paused in a breathless stalemate, waiting to see whose side man would eventually turn. Mortals had the unique ability to choose between darkness and light, and it was held that this would be the deciding factor in the outcome of the Great Conflict. Thus, the agents of the Netherrealms descended to the mortal realm to vie for the favor of man. The Sin War. The coming of the Great Conflict to the mortal realm is known as the Sin War. Angels and demons, disguising themselves while traveling amongst men, attempted to secretly lure mortals to their respective causes. Over time, the forces of darkness discovered that mortals responded much more to brute force than to subtle coercion, and so began to terrorize man into submission. The angels fought to defend humanity against this demonic oppression, but all too often, their austere methods and severe punishments succeeded only in alienating those whom they sought to protect. The violent battles of the Sin War occurred often, but they were seldom witnessed by the prying eyes of man. Only a few enlightened souls were aware of the supernatural beings that walked amongst the huddled masses of humanity. Powerful mortals arose and accepted the challenge of the Sin War, allying themselves with both sides of the great conflict. The legendary deeds of these great mortal warriors served to earn both the respect and the hatred of the netherworlds. Although lesser demons kneeled before those possessing power and strength, they also cursed the very existence of mortal man. Many of these fiends believed that the deadlock brought by the emergence of man was a perverse offense to their higher role in the great scheme of things. This jealousy of man led to harsh, atrocious acts of violence by demons against the mortal realm. Some men learned of this deep hatred and used it against the denizens of the underworld. One such mortal, Horazon the Summoner, delighted in summoning demons and then breaking them to his will. Horazon, along with his brother Bartok, were members of the Eastern Mage clan known as the Beastiary. This mystic clan studied the ways of demons and had catalogued their lore for generations. Empowered by this knowledge, Horazon was able to take the work of the Beastiary and pervert it for his demented purposes. The denizens of hell sought revenge against this bold mortal, but Horazon managed to keep himself well protected within his arcane sanctuary. Bartok, the brother of Horazon, was eventually lured to the side of darkness. He was granted exceptional strength and longevity and fought alongside the legions of hell against the cursed Beastiary and eventually his own brother during the Sin War. Although Bartok was renowned amongst the warriors of many realms, his dominance in battle came with a terrible price. An insatiable lust for mortal blood pervaded his every thought and deed. Bartok soon became as fond of bathing in the blood of his enemies as he did of shedding it, and in time he came to be known only as the Warlord of Blood. The Dark Exile.
7 is the number of powers of hell, and 7 is the number of great evils.
Duriel, the Lord of Pain. Andariel, the Maiden of Anguish. Belial, the Lord of Lies. Azmodan, the Lord of Sin. These are the true names of the lesser of the great evils. For ages uncounted, each have ruled over their own domains within the burning hells, seeking absolute dominion over their infernal brethren. As the lesser four continuously vied for control over those forces that dwelled within their realms, the greater three held absolute power over the whole of hell. The lesser four used dark and evil measures in their quest for power, and herein begins the legend of the Dark Exile. Mephisto, the Lord of Hatred. Baal, the Lord of Destruction. Diablo, the Lord of Terror. These are the prime evils of hell that wielded their power as a dark sovereign triumvirate. The three brothers ruled over the lesser four by brutal force and malicious cunning. Being the eldest and strongest of the evils, the three brothers were responsible for countless victories against the armies of the light. Although they never held sway over the high heavens for long, the three were justly feared by enemies and subjects alike. With the ascension of man and the subsequent standstill of the great conflict, the three brothers began to devote their energies to the perversion of mortal souls. The three realized that man was the key to victory in the war against heaven, and thus altered their rigid agendum that they had propagated since the beginning. This change caused many of the lesser evils to question the authority of the three, and so brought about the great rift between the prime evils and their servitors. In their ignorance, the lesser evils began to believe that the three were afraid to continue the war with heaven. Frustrated by the cessation of the war, Azmodan and Belial saw the situation as their chance to overthrow the prime evils and take control of hell for themselves. The two demon lords made a pact with their minor brethren, assuring them that the wretched plague of humanity would not deter the ultimate victory of the sons of hell. Azmodan and Belial devised a plan to end the stalemate, achieve victory in the Sin War, and ultimately ride the bloody crest of the great conflict, straight into the very arms of Armageddon. Thus, a great revolution was set into motion as all of Hell went to war against the three brothers. The brothers fought with all the savagery of the underworld, and to their credit, annihilated a third of Hell's treacherous legions. In the end, however, they were overcome by the Horned Death, led by the traitors Azmodan and Belial. The prime evils, weakened and bodiless, were banished to the mortal realm where Azmodan hoped they would remain, trapped forever. Azmodan believed that with the three set loose upon humanity, the angels would be forced to turn their focus upon the mortal plane, thus leaving the gates of heaven abandoned and defenseless. Those few demons who still pledged allegiance to the three brothers fled the wrath of Azmodan and Belial, escaping to the realm of man to seek out their lost masters. As the war fires died out upon the battlefields of Hell, Azmodan and Belial began to argue over which of them held the higher authority. The pact that they had made quickly fell to ashes as the two demon lords took up arms against each other. The legions of Hell that remained were polarized behind either warlord, launching themselves into a bloody civil war that has lasted to this day. The Binding of the Three. In the ancient days, before the rise of the Western empires, the dark and terrible entities known as the Three Evils were exiled to the world of man. These eternal entities wandered throughout the waking world and fed upon the lusts of men, leaving chaos and attrition in their wake. The evils turned father against son and prompted many great nations into brutal and petty wars. Their exile from Hell left them with an insatiable hunger to bring suffering and pain to all who would not kneel before them. And so, the three brothers ravaged the lands to the far east for countless centuries. Eventually, a secretive order of mortal magi was gathered together by the enigmatic archangel, Tyrael. These sorcerers were to hunt the three evils and put an end to their vicious rampage. The order, known as the Horadrim, consisted of wizards from the diverse and numerous mage clans of the East, employing desperate magical practices and disciplines. This unlikely brotherhood succeeded in capturing two of the brothers within powerful artifacts called Soul Stones. Mephisto and Baal, trapped within the swirling, spiritual constraints of the Soul Stones, were then buried beneath the dunes of the desolate eastern sands. The powers of hatred and wanton destruction seemed to diminish in the east as a nervous peace began to settle over the land. Yet, for many decades, the Horadrim continued their grim search for their third brother, Diablo. They knew that if the Lord of Terror was left untamed, there could never be any lasting peace within the realm of humanity. The Horadrim followed in the wake of terror and anarchy that spread throughout the western lands. After a great battle which claimed the lives of many brave souls, the Lord of Terror was captured and imprisoned within the last of the Soul Stones by a group of Horadrim monks led by the initiate Jared Kane. These monks carried the cursed stone to the land of Konduras and buried it within a secluded cave near the river Talsand. Above this cave, the Horadrim constructed a great monastery from which they could continue to safeguard the Soul Stone. As ages passed, the Horadrim constructed a network of catacombs beneath the monastery to house the earthly remains of the martyrs of their order. Generations passed in Konduras, and the numbers of the Horadrim slowly dwindled. With no quests left to undertake, and too few sons to sustain their guardianship, the once powerful order faded into obscurity. Eventually, the great monastery that they had built fell into ruins as well. Although villages grew and thrived around the shell of the old monastery, no one knew of the dark, secret passageways that stretched into the cold earth beneath it. No one could have dreamed of the burning red gem that pulsed within the labyrinth's heart. Book 2. The Return of Terror. The Lands of Konduras. Years after the last of the Horadrim had died, a great and prosperous society grew in the lands of the West. As time wore on, many Eastern pilgrims settled in the lands surrounding Konduras and soon established small, self-contained kingdoms. A few of these kingdoms bickered with Honduras over holdings of property or routes of trade. These squabbles did little to upset the lasting peace of the West, and the great northern kingdom of Westmarch proved to be a strong ally of Honduras as the two lands steadily engaged in ventures of barter and commerce. During this time, a bold new religion of the light, known as Zakarum, began to spread throughout the kingdom of Westmarch and into many of its northern principalities. Zakarum, founded in the far east, implored followers to enter into the light and forsake the darkness that lurked within their souls. The people of Westmarch adopted the statutes of Zakarum as their sacred mission in the world. Westmarch began to turn towards its neighbors, expecting them to embrace this new beginning as well. Tensions rose between the kingdoms of Westmarch and Honduras as the priests of Zakarum began to preach their foreign dogma, whether they were welcomed or not. It was then that the great northern lord Leoric came unto the lands of Honduras and, in the name of Zakarum, declared himself king. Leoric was a deeply religious man and had brought many knights and priests with him that comprised his Order of the Light. Leoric and his trusted advisor, the Archbishop Lazarus, made their way into the city of Tristram. Leoric appropriated the ancient, decrepit monastery on the outskirts of the town for his seat of power and renovated it to match his time-lost glory. Although the free people of Honduras were not pleased with being placed under the sudden rule of a foreign king, Leoric served them with justice and might. Eventually, the people of Honduras grew to respect the kind Leoric, sensing that he sought only to guide and protect them against the oppression of darkness. The Awakening. Not long after Leoric took possession of Honduras, a power long asleep awakened within the dark recesses beneath the monastery. Sensing that freedom was within his grasp, Diablo entered the nightmares of the Archbishop and lured him into the dark, subterranean labyrinth. In his terror, Lazarus raced throughout the abandoned hallways until he at last came to the chamber of the burning soulstone. No longer in command of his body and spirit, he raised the stone above his head and uttered words long forgotten in the realm of mortals. His will destroyed, Lazarus shattered the soulstone upon the ground. Diablo once again came into the world of man. Although he was released from his imprisonment within the soulstone, the Lord of Terror was still greatly weakened from his long sleep and required an anchor to the world. Once he had found a mortal form to wear, he could begin to reclaim his vastly depleted power. The great demon weighed the souls residing in the town above, and chose to take the strongest of them, that of King Leoric. For many months, King Leoric secretly fought the evil presence that twisted his thoughts and emotions. Sensing that he had been possessed by some unknown evil, Leoric hid his dark secret from his priests, hoping that somehow his own devout righteousness would be enough to exorcise the corruption growing inside him. He was sorely mistaken. Diablo stripped away the core of Leoric's being, burning away all honor and virtue from his soul. Lazarus, too, had fallen under the sway of the demon, keeping close to Leoric at all times. Lazarus worked to conceal the plans of his new master from the Order of Light, hoping that the demon's power would grow well concealed amongst the servants of the Zakarum. The priests of Zakarum and the citizenry of Honduras recognized a disturbing change within their liege. His once proud and rugged form became distorted and deformed. King Leoric became increasingly deranged and ordered immediate executions of any who dared question his methods or authority. Leoric began to send his knights to other villages to bully their townspeople into submission. The people of Honduras, who had once grown to see great honor in their ruler, began to call Leoric the Black King. Driven to the brink of madness by the Lord of Terror, King Leoric began to slowly alienate his closest friends and advisors. Lactanan, captain of the Knights of the Order of Light and honored champion of Zakarum, tried to discern the nature of his king's deteriorating spirit. Yet at every turn, the Archbishop Lazarus would waylay Lactanan and admonish him for questioning the actions of the king. As tensions grew between the two, Lazarus charged Lactanon with treason against the kingdom. To the priests and knights of Leoric's court, the prospect of Lactanon committing treason was ridiculous. Lactanon's motives were honorable and just, and soon many began to question the reason of their once-beloved king. Leoric's madness was growing more obvious with each passing day. Sensing that the advisors of the court were becoming increasingly suspicious of foul treachery, Lazarus desperately sought to contain the eroding situation. The archbishop masterfully convinced the delusional Leoric that the kingdom of Westmarch was plotting against him, secretly planning to dethrone him and annex Honduras into its own lands. Leoric flew into a rage and summoned his advisors to his side. Manipulated by the archbishop, the paranoid king declared a state of war between the kingdoms of Honduras and Westmarch. Leoric ignored the warnings and admonishments of his advisors, and the royal army of Honduras was ordered to the north to engage in a war that they did not believe in. Lactanon was appointed by Lazarus to lead the armies of Honduras into Westmarch. Although Lactanon argued against the necessity of the coming conflict, he was honor-bound to uphold the will of his king. Many of the high priests and officials were forced to travel to the north as emissaries on errands of diplomatic urgency as well. The desperate ploy of Lazarus had succeeded in sending many of the king's more troublesome advisors to their certain deaths. The Darkening of Tristram. The absence of prying advisors and inquisitive priests left Diablo free to assume total control over the king's battered soul. As the Lord of Terror attempted to strengthen his hold upon the maddened king, he found that the lingering spirit of Leoric fought with him still. Although the control over Leoric that Diablo held was formidable, the demon knew that in his weakened state, he could never take complete possession over his soul as long as a glimmer of his will remained. The demon lord sought a fresh and innocent host upon which to build his terror. The demon relinquished his control over Leoric, but the king's soul was left corrupted and his mind crazed. Diablo began to search throughout the kingdom of Honduras for the perfect vessel to act as his focus, and found such a soul easily within his reach. Enjoined by his dark master, Lazarus kidnapped Albrecht, the only son of Leoric, and dragged the terrified youth down into the blackness of the labyrinth. Flooding the boy's defenseless mind with the essence of pure terror, Diablo easily took possession of the young Albrecht. Pain and fire raced through the child's soul. Hideous laughter filled his head and clouded his thoughts. Paralyzed with fear, Albrecht felt the presence of Diablo within his mind, and it seemed to push him down, deeper and deeper into darkness and oblivion. Diablo gazed upon his surroundings through the eyes of the young prince. A lustful hunger still tortured the demon after his frustrating bout of control over Leoric, but the nightmares of the boy provided ample substance to sate him. Reaching deep into Albrecht's subconscious, Diablo ripped the greatest fears from the child and their hiding places and gave them breath. Albrecht watched as if out of a dream. Twisted and disfigured forms appeared all around him. Unholy writhing visages of terror danced about him, chanting choruses of obscenities. All of the monsters that he had ever imagined or believed that he had seen in his life became flesh and were given life before him. Large bodies comprised of living rock erupted from the walls and bowed to their dark master. The ancient skeletal corpses of the Horadrim arose from archaic crypts and lumbered off into the red-washed corridors beyond. As the cacophony of madness and nightmares hammered its final blow against Albrecht's shattered spirit, the bloodlusted ghouls and demons of his mind scattered and scrambled maniacally into the lengthening passageways of his waking nightmare. The ancient catacombs of the Horadrim had become a twisted labyrinth of raw, focused terror. Empowered by Diablo's possession of young Albrecht, the creatures of the boy's own imagination had gained corporeal form. So strong was the terror that now grew inside of Albrecht that the borders of the mortal realm began to warp and tear. The burning hell began to seep into the world of man and take root within the labyrinth. Beings and occurrences displaced by time and space and long lost to the history of man were pulled screaming into the ever-expanding domain. The body of Albrecht, fully possessed by Diablo, began to distort and change. The small boy grew and his eyes blazed as tendril-like spines ripped through his flesh. Great and arched horns erupted from Albrecht's skull as Diablo altered the form of the child to match that of his demonic body. Deep within the recesses of the labyrinth, a growing power was being harnessed. When the moment was right, Diablo would venture once more into the mortal world and free his captive brothers, Mephisto and Baal. The prime evils would be reunited, and together they would reclaim their rightful place in hell. The fall of the Black King. The war against the zealous armies of Westmarch ended with a horrible slaughter. With the army of Honduras ripped to shreds by the superior numbers and defensive positions of Westmarch, Lactanon quickly gathered together those who were not captured or killed and ordered a retreat back to the safety of Honduras. They returned to find the town of Tristram in shambles. King Leoric, deep within the throes of madness, went into a rage when he learned that his son was missing. After scouring the village with the few guards that remained with him at the monastery, Leoric had decided that the townsfolk had abducted his son and hidden him somewhere. Although the townsfolk denied any knowledge of Prince Albrecht's whereabouts, Leoric insisted that they had crafted a conspiracy against him, that they would pay the price of such treachery. The mysterious disappearance of the Archbishop Lazarus left no one in Tristram with whom the king would take counsel. Overcome by grief and dementia, Leoric had many of the townsfolk executed for the crime of high treason. As Lactanon and his fellow survivors returned to confront their king, Leoric sent his few remaining guards against them, believing that Lactanon was somehow part of the townsfolk's conspiracy. Leoric decreed that he and his party were to die. Lactanon, finally realizing that Leoric was beyond salvation, ordered his men to defend themselves. The ensuing battle carried them down into the very halls of the darkened monastery, bringing a final desecration to the once holy sanctum of the Horadrim. Lactanon won a bittersweet victory as his men were forced to kill all of Leoric's deceived protectors. They cornered the ravenous king within his own sanctuary and begged him to explain the atrocities he had committed. Leoric only spat at them and cursed them for traitors against both his crown and the light. Lactanon walked slowly toward his king and sorrowfully drew his sword, full of grief and rage, all honor having been cast to the winds. Lactanon ran his blade through Leoric's shriveled, blackened heart. The once noble king screamed an unearthly death cry, and as his madness finally overtook him, he brought down a curse upon those who had so betrayed him, calling upon the forces of darkness that he had spent his entire life combating. Leoric condemned Lactanon and the others to eternal damnation. In that last, fleeting moment within the heart of the monastery, all that was ever virtuous and honorable about the stewards of Honduras was shattered forever. The reign of Diablo. The Black King lay dead, slain at the hands of his own priests and knights. The young Prince Albrecht was still missing, and the proud defenders of Honduras were no more. The people of Tristram looked about their lifeless town and were greatly dismayed, awash in the feelings of both relief and remorse. They soon realized that their troubles had merely begun. Strange, eerie lights appeared in the darkened windows of the monastery. Misshapen, leathery-skinned creatures were seen venturing forth from the shadows of the church. Horrible, wounded cries seemed to linger on the wind, emanating from deep underground. It became apparent that something quite unnatural had infested the once holy site. Travelers on the roads surrounding Tristram were accosted by cloaked riders that seemed to now constantly roam the deserted countryside. Many villagers fled Tristram, making their way to other towns or kingdoms, fearing some unnamed evil that seemed to wait in the shadows all around them. Those few who chose to remain seldom ventured out at night, and never tread foot upon the grounds of the cursed monastery. Whispered rumors of poor, innocent people being abducted in the night by wicked, nightmarish creatures filled the halls and the local inn. With no king, no law, and no army left to defend them, many of the townsfolk began to fear an attack from the things that now dwelt beneath their town. The Archbishop Lazarus, frayed and disheveled, returned from his absence and assured the townsfolk that he too had been ravaged by the growing evil of the monastery. With their desperate need for reassurance clouding their good judgment, Lazarus whipped the townsfolk into a frenzied mob, reminding them that Prince Albrecht was still unaccounted for. He persuaded many of the men to follow him into the depths of the monastery to search for the boy. They gathered torches, and soon the night air glowed with the flickering light of hope. They armed themselves with shovels, picks, and scythes, and so prepared, they boldly followed the treacherous archbishop straight into the fiery maw of hell itself. The few who survived the horrible fate that awaited them returned to Tristram and recounted what they could of the ordeal. Their wounds were terrible, and even the skills of the healer could not save some of them. As the stories of demons and devils spread, the stifling, primal terror began to consume the hearts of all of the town's inhabitants. It was a terror that none of them had ever known. Deep beneath the foundations of the ruined monastery, Diablo gorged himself upon the fears of the mortals above him. He slowly sank back into the welcoming shadows and began to harness his depleted power. He smiled to himself in the sheltering darkness, for he knew that the time of his final victory was fast approaching. The Nature of the Soulstones by Jared Kane of the Horadrim. It was long ago that the enigmatic Archangel Tyrael bestowed upon us the secrets of the mysterious Soulstones. Tyrael bequested upon our order 3 of these stones, so we could contain the vile essences of the 3 prime evils who had been set loose upon our world. Although the artifacts were constructed in realms far removed from our own, we found that they were simple to understand. The Soul Stones affect only beings that are non-corporeal, and thus have no power over living, breathing creatures. When invoked, the Soul Stones bring into being a strong, spiritual vacuum. Any non-physical entities caught within this vacuum are drawn into the burning recesses of the Soul Stone and are forever trapped within. These spirits are released only when the Soul Stone is deactivated or destroyed. The power of the Soul Stones proved to be much more difficult to employ when used against the great prime evils. Voraciously disposed to possessing hapless mortals, the 3 brothers found that they were immune to the effects of the stones while occupying human souls. Sadly, we were forced to hunt down and kill the innocent victims of the prime evils so that their demonic essences could be subject to the effects of the Soul Stones. Mephisto and Baal, once found, were easily lured into the Soul Stones. The capture of their brother Baal, however, became complicated when the Soul Stone that was to be his eternal prison was shattered and fragmented. We found that while the shards still held the power to lure the demon to them, they could not properly contain it. Talrasha, a fellow initiate who has been since immortalized in Horadrim lore, theorized that a mortal of strong will might be able to contain Baal within his own mortal soul. This sacrifice meant that the essence of any mortal so chosen would be forever tortured while locked in eternal conflict with the enthralled demon. To this end, Talrasha volunteered to contain the raging Lord of Destruction. Piercing his breast with the shard of the Soul Stone, Talrasha took within himself the essence of Baal, the Lord of Destruction. The initiate's body was shackled, chained, and buried deep within a tomb under the desert. The sacrifice of Talrasha has kept Baal imprisoned for many years now, and although the demon was imprisoned without the use of the whole Soul Stone, we believe that our victory may be a hollow one. Should Talrasha ever escape, he would have the formidable powers of Baal added to his own. By ridding the world of this present evil, we may have created a nightmare worse than that which we first sought to contain.